good afternoon on what is a damp, grey, overcast day. It is Sunday, October the 24th, and I'm in the reading nook with a nice hot cup of tea and my generally insistent assistant, who is not ours. I should remind you, he just has adopted us. Anyway, so what I'm going to look at today is Twilight Imperium, Ashes of Power. Now, this is from Fantasy Flight Games. It was released for Free RPG Day, which took place last Saturday on October 16th, and is one of many titles available on the day. Hopefully you were able to get to your friendly local gaming shop and grab a copy of this or something else that caught your interest. I have a copy of this thanks to David Salisbury at Fanboy3. I'd like to extend my thanks to him because otherwise I wouldn't be able to make this video and do a subsequent review, so thank you very much. And if you don't have a friendly local gaming store, then I do implore you to essentially patronise one, support one that does a decent put a mail order service. There are plenty of those available, and they do stock some great games. Anyway, on to Twilight Imperium, Ashes of Power. Take it. There's the back, and it uses the Genesys system, and I'll come on to that in a minute. So, Ashes of Power. Take on a vital mission with the fate of the galaxy at stake. Long ago, the galaxy was ruled by the great Lazak Empire. For thousands of years, they governed over an era of peace and harmonious cooperation between thousands of species. However, no Imperium can last forever. When the Lazaks fell, the resulting wars shattered galactic civilization for millennia. Now the galaxy struggles to rebuild, with dozens of powerful civilizations fighting to be the next masters of the reforged empire. The reborn Galactic Council has become a hotbed of intrigue and policy, and all the while, most councillors ignore other threats that lurk on the edges of known space. As one of the Killeries, you're responsible for protecting the galaxy from these threats. You're the Council's agents, operating with their authority but burdened with their factionalism and infighting. And when your cohort is dispatched to a recently rediscovered world to investigate worrying reports, you may be the only ones standing between the galaxy and destruction. This Genesys adventure for Free RPG Day includes a complete set of simplified rules for playing Genesys, and no other books required. 4 pre-made characters, each with their own unique powers and abilities. Players a disciplined human, orbital drop trooper, a clever Hakan, a wayfarer, a genius Hylar field scholar, or a charming Zarcha liaison. An engaging adventure that throws you straight into the action, while teaching new players how to play the game. So, the other thing is that you can get the Genesys Dice app for this. Now, the thing is about the Genesys system is essentially you're rolling successes and opportunities and benefits and things, and basically hoping for it's to avoid basically bad effects. Okay, and it has a long history. So ultimately, essentially, it's the generic version of a set of rules in terms of role-playing that originated with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd edition, and then became part of, essentially was used for the Star Wars role-playing game, all of them, from Fantasy Flight Games, and then was adopted by Legend of the Five Rings 5th edition, and then became Genesys, and has been used in a number of different role-playing games from Fantasy Flight Games. Now, if you go back a step further, that dice mechanic is actually derived from the first Doom board game, and then was used in Descent, and has been since used in both in the subsequent versions of Descent and in the second Doom board game. So it's got quite a long history in its use across Fantasy Flight's family of board games and role-playing games. Now, anyway, so essentially, the other thing to bear in mind is that the Edge Studio now handles all of the role-playing side of Fantasy Flight role-playing franchises. But back to Twilight Imperium. Now, the thing is, this is actually another one of those role-playing games based upon a board game. Now, I looked at the zombie side released for Free RPG Day. but this is which is the same thing, but based on its own board game. This is based upon Twilight Imperium, a board game which is essentially a 4X game. You know, expand, exploit, explore, exterminate. It is a big game of galactic civilizations clashing together for dominance, and the game overall sort of comes with 17 different factions, and you can play. It takes an age to play, but it looks great on the table, and there's a lot of depth to it. But there's also a lot of background to it, and this is where the role-playing game comes into it, because essentially you can go in and explore that background on a more personal level than you can just essentially directing the economics, the exploration, the diplomatic and military efforts of your empire. You can do it as a player character with something like this, and obviously the forthcoming role-playing game based upon the setting. So we open up, and we have an explanation of what Genesys is. So here we go, and then explaining the rules, what Twilight Imperium is, and it gives you a rules summary, and it involves rolling lots of different dice to get different symbols, and they do mean different means of successes, critical successes, and then the difficulty is represented by other dice, which will cancel out the successes and other effects that you will have, and what you've got left over can essentially decides the outcome. So you have ability dice for your for your attributes, proficiency dice for your skills, boost dice which represent beneficial benefits and advantages according to the situation or your gear, and then on the other side you have difficulty dice, challenge dice, setback dice. Okay, and it's a case of essentially rolling all of those dice and interpreting the symbols. It takes some adjustment getting used to, because you're not looking at numbers. So, and then you've got essentially a description of all the characteristics and skills. And various basic use of skills, and then we're into combat. I'm going to basically accompanied by some nice bits of artwork as well. So we'll get to look at that. Covering other actions, spending advantage, basically spending advantage, triumph and threat, and despair in combat. Essentially, that's what you generate, and you apart from succeeding, you have extra bits you can spend for various results. And then we get into Welcome to Twilight Imperium. So background again, a bit in more detail, and this nicely sets everything up for the adventure itself. It also explains who the Claries are and allegiances and the like. So that's basically giving everything you need to know to start playing in terms as far as the player is concerned. Before we get into the actual scenario, where that begins with a briefing, and then we have essentially that sort of like, here's your first game, here's the first thing, but you don't know the rules, or you've read the rules, haven't actually used them yet. So here's a situation where you can basically learn about skill checks. So we've got an explanation of that there for the referee's benefit, and she will cover those, take the players through that situation before we essentially they go on to where's our ship, locate that, and go out to essentially exploring the location and the danger of Herald's Pool. Okay, so, and then we've got wider investigations and essentially exploring the world and discovering more about the situation. And then we're deep into the trade sector before we get to the dark secret. Okay, basically the secret facility. I'm facing a dark threat. So reaching the facility, encountering an ancient. Oh, that's never good. Whatever your science fiction setting, encountering an agent is never really good, because A, they typically don't understand you and think and will condescend to you, and B, you don't understand them, because you've been messing about in their universe for whilst they've been away, and they don't like what you've done. That's typically what happens. And then lastly, we have got some character sheets. We've got a liaison. and then a human drop soldier, and a Hylar field scholar. The last one is a Hakan wayfarer. So you've got their 4 players, and yeah, basically everything you need to play, apart from some dice or the app. Basically, and you can get going with basically your first taste of Twilight Imperium as a role-playing setting. So yeah, I'm going to look forward to digging into that in more details. I've looked at other Genesys kind of systems before, most notably Legend of the Five Rings, because at some point I was playing quite a lot of Legend of the Five Rings, and I played that for about 10 years or so, through the end of 3rd into 4th and then 5th edition, and it's a great setting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition coming out, which will be more fantastic than the core game. In a sense, the core game of Legend of the Five Rings is focused primarily upon feuds and wars and that sort of thing, whereas the D&D version will essentially will look at sort of like the mythology and the fantasy of it as such. But anyway, that's by the by. This is Twilight Imperium: Ashes of Power, the free RPG Day release from Fantasy Flight Games. Gives you a taster of essentially the role-playing game. For their basically the board game they've been publishing for years, and I will do a review of that in due course. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed watching this this unboxing here in the Nook. If you have, please do click the like button, and if you've got any comments or feedback, I appreciate you taking the time to post those, and I do read those. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to yet more videos from me, whether they be essentially discussions of further releases for free RPG Day, which will be appearing daily, as well as the general unboxing videos that I post every day, where each time you will see me sat here in the Nook, I'm basically talking about a book or a game to the best of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so. Basically, all accompanied, of course, by a nice hot cup of tea. And more recently, Tiddles the cat. Please hit that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching. Hope you've enjoyed the video. I'll be back again soon. Bye for now.